The world applauds ignorance, and you are watching it happen. What if I told you the world you live in is quietly training you to love ignorance and laugh at wisdom? Think about it. The loudest voices today are often the shallowest, and the quiet pursuit of truth is treated as weakness. But why? How did we arrive at a place where depth is mocked and distraction is worshipped? Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see a hidden pattern that explains not only the chaos of society, but also the silent struggle inside yourself. This is not just a commentary, it's a mirror. Every word you're about to hear will challenge you, confront you, and, if you're willing, awaken you. Because here's the secret. What the world celebrates may be a lie, and what it ridicules may be your path to freedom. And before we dive in, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the truth the noise tries to hide. Imagine the very first words you hear are not just words, but a mirror held up to your world. Imagine living in a world where the loudest voice is mistaken for the wisest. That single line doesn't waste time with pleasantries, it grabs you by the collar and shakes you awake. It forces you into a picture so exaggerated, so uncomfortable, that your mind wants to deny it. But then comes the twist. Now stop imagining, because that world is here and you are living in it. And suddenly, denial is no longer an option. You are implicated. You are inside the story. When you hear a bold claim like the idea that society glorifies stupidity, your first instinct might be to resist it. Part of you wonders, is this just one person's opinion? Why should I take it seriously? This is where the journey deploys one of its most powerful tools, the authority stack. Instead of leaving you floating in one person's perspective, it anchors the argument with the voices of giants. Socrates, Nietzsche, Jung, Chomsky, Frankl. These names are not chosen at random. They are carefully curated to create a web of credibility across time, culture, and discipline. The effect is simple yet profound. This isn't just an opinion. It's a lineage of wisdom speaking through centuries. Think about it. When Socrates is quoted, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing," the argument suddenly gains a foundation older than democracy itself. Nietzsche warns about truth and illusion, and suddenly the claim feels prophetic, almost inevitable. Jung reminds us that thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. And the critique of modern superficiality lands with surgical precision. Each quote functions like a stone in an ancient path, guiding the viewer toward a deeper recognition. This is not a new problem. It is a timeless struggle. Psychologically, this is brilliant. We are wired to respond to authority. When experts, sages, or revered figures echo a thought, we trust it more. It bypasses skepticism because it feels confirmed by history itself. The journey doesn't need to shout, "Believe me." Instead, it whispers, "Believe them," and see how it aligns with what you already feel. This creates resonance, a sense that the viewer's private unease with society has been noticed, articulated, and validated by the greatest minds in history. That resonance is magnetic, but authority stacking does more than just lend credibility. It expands the horizon of the audience. By weaving voices from Greece, China, Egypt, modern psychology, and political philosophy, it gives the impression of universality. It tells the viewer, no matter where you look, wisdom traditions converge on this truth. Depth matters, reflection matters, and society ignores this at its peril. That universality reassures the viewer that their longing for meaning isn't fringe, it's part of a vast human inheritance. Another subtle strength of this technique is how it contrasts the past with the present. The journey paints a vivid picture of ancient cultures revering wisdom, then juxtaposes it with modern culture's obsession with entertainment. The authority of the past becomes a mirror reflecting our present decline. That contrast doesn't just inform, it wounds. It makes the viewer feel the loss personally, as though humanity has traded its crown for cheap glitter. And then comes the most important turn. These voices of authority are not relics to admire. They are tools to use. By grounding the critique in timeless wisdom, the journey prepares the audience to accept the solutions offered later. If Socrates, Nietzsche, and Jung diagnosed the disease, then surely the remedies that follow must be taken seriously. Authority here is not a wall. It is a bridge, carrying the viewer from skepticism to belief, from belief to action. That is the genius of the authority stack. It doesn't just tell you what is true, it reminds you that the wisest who ever lived already saw it. One of the most overlooked yet powerful storytelling techniques in this journey is the use of open loops. From the very beginning, it tells you, stay until the end, because the final revelation will change the way you see the world. That single promise shifts the entire dynamic. You are no longer passively watching a video, you are now waiting for something. You've been given a ticket, and the destination hasn't been revealed yet. The tension this creates is subtle but relentless. Your mind keeps tugging at the question, what is this revelation? And as long as that question remains unanswered, you stay hooked. This technique works because our psychology is allergic to incompleteness. When we encounter an unfinished story, our brains light up with discomfort. It's the same reason cliffhangers torment us, why we can't resist finishing a mystery novel at 2 a.m., why even a half-told joke makes us lean in for the punchline. The journey exploits this perfectly. By promising a life-altering insight at the end, it opens a loop that demands closure. Even if you feel distracted midway through, some part of you insists, I can't leave now, I need to know. But the journey doesn't just open one loop, it layers them. First, it raises the broad cultural question, why does modern society reward ignorance and mock wisdom? Then it adds secondary loops through philosophers' voices, Socrates, Nietzsche, Jung, each quote posing an implicit riddle. Next, it digs into your personal psychology. Are you complicit in this culture of noise? Are you part of the problem? Each of these questions is an unfinished thread, pulling you deeper. The genius here is that all these threads converge into the ultimate promise, an answer that will not only expose the truth, but give you tools to rise above it. Notice the pacing, too. If the journey had revealed the final revelation too early, the tension would collapse. Instead, it teases and escalates. It contrasts past wisdom with present chaos. It exposes the problem layer by layer, making you feel the weight of the sickness before hinting at the cure. This is essential because the more invested you are in the problem, the more desperately you crave the solution. That craving is the heartbeat of retention. What makes this even more effective is that the loop isn't just intellectual, it's emotional. It plays on curiosity, yes, but also on identity. If the world really is celebrating ignorance, what does that say about you? Are you merely another voice in the noise, or are you seeking something higher? That question is left dangling, unanswered, until the end. And because identity is the deepest driver of human behavior, you feel compelled to stay until you find resolution. The open loop promise is not a trick, it's a pact. The journey says, give me your attention, and I'll give you transformation. As long as the payoff delivers, this technique doesn't just keep people watching. It makes them grateful they stayed. That's why open loops are not only effective, but unforgettable. Every great journey that speaks to the human spirit dances between two poles, the brutal truth of what is wrong and the shining possibility of what could be right. This journey masters that rhythm. It does not shy away from critique. It lays bare the ugliness of a world intoxicated by noise, addicted to superficiality, blind to depth. It names the sickness without hesitation, but it doesn't stop there. Immediately after the sting of critique, it breathes hope back into the audience. It tells them that wisdom can be reclaimed, that meaning can still be pursued, that even in the darkest cultural climate, the individual can choose a higher path. That back and forth rhythm is what makes the message bearable, compelling, and even uplifting. If a message is only critique, it collapses under its own weight. People feel attacked, helpless, or defensive. If a message is only hope, it floats away, unconvincing and naive. But when critique and hope are woven together, each sharpens the other. The darkness makes the light brighter, and the light makes the darkness survivable. This is exactly how the journey moves. It first unsettles you with harsh realities, mockery of wisdom, glorification of ignorance, then immediately reminds you that great minds before you have faced the same battle and left behind maps to transcend it. That interplay keeps the audience engaged without despair. Psychologically, this rhythm mirrors the way transformation actually feels. Change never begins with inspiration alone. It begins with the recognition that something is wrong, that there is a gap between what is and what should be. The journey forces you to confront that gap. But then, before despair can harden, it offers hope. It tells you that you are not doomed, that within you is the power to resist, to think, to seek truth. This sequence, pain, then possibility, is what makes the audience not just listen, but feel compelled to act. The rhythm also creates trust. When a journey is willing to be brutally honest about the problems of the world, you believe it more when it offers solutions. You don't feel like you're being sold empty positivity. You feel like you're being guided by someone unafraid to face reality. That credibility transforms the hopeful notes into a lifeline. It's as though the voice is saying, yes, the world is sick, but you don't have to be sick with it. You can be more. That is not just encouragement, it's liberation. Most importantly, this rhythm creates momentum. Critique provokes thought. Hope inspires action. Together, they generate movement. The audience doesn't just sit there, nodding. They start imagining, planning, even desiring to live differently. That's how you take a passive viewer and transform them into an active participant. That's how a journey doesn't just inform, it ignites. The rhythm of critique and hope is not an accident. It is a deliberate design. It's the heartbeat of persuasion, the pulse of transformation. And in this journey, that pulse is strong, steady, unforgettable. There is a moment in this journey when the message stops being abstract and suddenly becomes uncomfortably personal. Up until then, you may feel like you're watching a cultural commentary, nodding along at the critique of society, agreeing that ignorance has been glorified and wisdom mocked. But then the journey turns its gaze directly toward you. It begins to ask questions in the second person. Are you complicit? Are you living in the noise? Are you choosing distraction over depth? That shift is electrifying. The audience is no longer a spectator. They are on trial. And in that confrontation, engagement skyrockets. This technique works because of how human psychology responds to direct address. When someone says we, the responsibility is spread out, softened. But when they say you, there is nowhere to hide. The journey forces the viewer to stop deflecting and start reflecting. Suddenly, it isn't about vague societal trends. It's about your scrolling habits, your willingness to settle for shallow conversations, your surrender to mediocrity. That sting of personal accountability is exactly what jolts people awake. It transforms passive agreement into an inner reckoning. But notice how the challenge is delivered. It isn't cruel. It doesn't shame the viewer into paralysis. Instead, it calls them higher. The voice is stern yet empowering, almost like a mentor or psychologist who refuses to let you waste your potential. The message is clear. You can do better. You are capable of more. But first, you must admit where you've been asleep. This balanced confrontation without condemnation is what makes the challenge digestible. The viewer doesn't feel destroyed. They feel summoned. Direct address also forges intimacy. By speaking to the viewer personally, the journey collapses the distance between speaker and audience. It feels less like a broadcast and more like a one-on-one conversation. That intimacy builds trust, and trust is the gateway to influence. When you feel like someone is speaking directly to you, naming your struggles, your doubts, your hidden fears, you instinctively lean closer. You don't want to miss what comes next. This challenge also strengthens retention because it creates unfinished business. Once you've been asked a hard question, you want to know how to answer it. If the journey asks, will you rise above the noise, or will you stay trapped in it? You can't just walk away. You need guidance, a path forward. This ensures that when the journey later offers practical steps and spiritual payoffs, the audience is primed and ready to receive them. The challenge has softened the ground for transformation. In the end, the direct challenge is what makes the journey unforgettable. It stops being entertainment and becomes a mirror. It makes the viewer see themselves not as a passive consumer of ideas, but as the protagonist of their own story. And that, more than anything, is what moves people from watching a video to changing their lives. Every great message must land somewhere. It cannot remain in the realm of critique, theory, or poetic vision alone. If it does, the audience may feel stirred but not transformed. This journey understands that truth without a path feels heavy, even cruel. That's why it closes by offering something concrete, practical steps the viewer can take, and a deeper spiritual payoff that makes those steps meaningful. It does not leave the audience drowning in noise. It hands them a rope and shows them how to climb. The brilliance lies in how those steps are framed. They are not presented as rigid instructions or lifeless rules. Instead, they are framed as choices, as invitations to reclaim agency. The journey says, in essence, you cannot silence the chaos of the world, but you can decide how much of it you'll let in. You cannot control the flood of shallow voices, but you can choose to seek out depth. You cannot dictate the values of the culture, but you can cultivate values within yourself. That reframe transforms overwhelming problems into empowering actions. The viewer begins to see that they are not helpless, they are responsible. Each practical suggestion is also designed to feel achievable. For instance, the call to embrace stillness, to read deeply, to seek conversations that stretch the mind. These are not impossible tasks. They are small, repeatable practices that accumulate into transformation. The genius is that they feel both urgent and doable. That combination fuels momentum. The audience doesn't just think. That's inspiring. They think, I can start today. But what truly elevates this section is the spiritual dimension. The journey doesn't simply tell you how to think better. It reminds you why it matters. It frames the pursuit of wisdom as a sacred rebellion against mediocrity, as an act of courage in a world addicted to distraction. It suggests that choosing depth over noise is not just self-improvement. It is self-liberation. This is the payoff. The recognition that by seeking truth, you are not only enriching your mind, but saving your soul. Psychologically, this is powerful because it taps into the deepest human drives: meaning, identity, transcendence. People are not motivated by tips alone. They are motivated by a vision of who they could become. By closing with both steps and payoff, the journey gives the viewer not just a plan, but a purpose. It shifts the focus from surviving in a broken culture to rising above it, from consuming knowledge to embodying wisdom. The final note leaves the viewer with a sense of destiny. They are no longer just part of the crowd, they are called to be different, to be more. The practical steps make it possible, but the spiritual payoff makes it irresistible. That's why the journey doesn't simply end. It echoes. It lingers in the heart, whispering a challenge every time the noise of the world grows loud. You can rise. You must rise.